Security! Get this kid out of here before he contaminates something. Dr. Harrison's shrill voice echoed through the hallway of Chicago Memorial Hospital as he pointed to the 10-year-old boy who had just walked through the front door. Jerome Williams stopped in the middle of the marble lobby, his worn sneakers contrasting sharply with the shiny floor. He had walked 12 blocks in the freezing November rain to get there, but it wasn't the cold that made his hand shake, it was the urgency of a promise he had made to his own conscience. "Please, sir," Jerome said, his voice calm, surprising everyone. "I just want to help the girl in the wheelchair. I know how to make her walk." Dr. Harrison, head of the Pediatric Neurology Department and heir to a medical dynasty that went back 4 generations, looked at the boy as if he were a stain on his immaculate lab coat. "Didn't you hear me? I called security. Street kids don't come in here and tell doctors how to do their jobs." At 45, Dr. Harrison had built his reputation treating only the children of Chicago's elite. His specialty was telling wealthy parents exactly what they wanted to hear, even when there was no hope left, especially when it came to the daughter of the powerful Dr. Michael Foster, chief surgeon and the hospital's largest donor. "The girl has been in physical therapy for 3 years and has never taken a step," Jerome continued, ignoring the approaching security guards. "But I can help. My grandmother taught me." Dr. Foster appeared in the hallway at that moment, pushing the wheelchair of his 7-year-old daughter, Emma. The girl, born with cerebral palsy, watched everything with wide, curious eyes. When she saw Jerome, something inexplicable happened. She smiled and stretched her little arms toward him. "Emma, no," Dr. Foster whispered, pulling the chair back. "Let's go to the session." But Emma pointed at Jerome and said her first clear word in 2 years, "Friend." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Harrison felt a twinge of irritation at the girl's reaction. In the 3 years he had been treating Emma, she had never shown any interest in anyone or any treatment. Jerome knelt down to the level of the wheelchair, his eyes meeting Emma's. "Hi, Princess. Do you want to learn how to dance?" "Enough!" exploded Dr. Harrison. "Security, remove this boy immediately. And you," he pointed at Jerome, "if you show your face here again, I'll call the police." Jerome stood up slowly, but before he was escorted out, he whispered something that made Dr. Harrison's blood run cold. "Doctor, I know exactly why Emma never got better, and I know. You know too." As the security guards led him to the exit, Jerome kept his gaze fixed on Dr. Harrison. There was something in those eyes that didn't belong to a 10-year-old boy, an ancient wisdom, an unshakable determination, and even more disturbing, the quiet confidence of someone who holds secrets too powerful to be revealed at the wrong time. 3 days had passed since Jerome had been escorted out of Memorial Hospital, but Dr. Harrison couldn't get those words out of his head. "I know exactly why Emma never got better, and I know you do too. What the hell did that kid mean by that?" Harrison tried to convince himself that it was just the ravings of a disturbed child, but something in the certainty of those eyes bothered him deeply. On Thursday morning, he arrived at the hospital and found Jerome sitting on the steps of the main entrance as if he were waiting. The boy made no attempt to enter. He just watched the comings and goings through the glass doors with a patience that belied his age. "Haven't you called the police yet?" Harrison asked sharply of the security guard at the front desk. "He's not causing any trouble, doctor. He just sits there." Technically, the sidewalk is public property. Harrison felt a twinge of irritation. This boy was clearly trying to provoke him, and it was working. During Emma's physical therapy session that morning, something strange happened. The girl, who was normally apathetic and uninterested, kept looking toward the window. When Dr. Harrison followed her gaze, he saw Jerome outside, watching through the glass. Emma began to fidget in her chair, trying to communicate through gestures. It was the first time in months that she had shown any kind of urgency or desire. "What's going on with her today?" asked Dr. Foster, noticing the change in his daughter's behavior. "Just a phase," Harrison replied dryly, closing the curtains on the window. "Maybe we should adjust her medication." But Emma didn't calm down. On the contrary, she began to cry real tears of frustration that Harrison hadn't seen in years. It was as if she was desperately trying to communicate something that no one could understand. That afternoon, Harrison discovered Jerome talking to Janet, one of the hospital's most senior nurses, in the parking lot. The scene angered him. "Janet, you were instructed not to interact with this child." "I'm sorry, Dr. Harrison, but he was telling me about techniques his grandmother used with special children." "It's fascinating, actually." "Fascinating?" Harrison almost shouted. "He's an uneducated child who lives on the street." Jerome turned calmly to Harrison. "Doctor, my grandmother was Lily Williams. She worked at this hospital for 30 years in the Pediatric Neurology Department. Perhaps you remember her." Harrison's blood ran cold. He remembered Lily Williams very well, one of the most respected nurses who had ever worked there, known for getting extraordinary results with cases considered impossible. She had retired 15 years ago and had recently passed away. That's not possible," Harrison stammered. "She raised me after my parents died," Jerome continued, his voice maintaining the disturbing calm. "She taught me everything about how children's brains work, how to connect with them when adults give up. She taught me especially about cases like Emma's." Janet looked between the two men, feeling the tension in the air. "Dr. Harrison, if he really is Lily's grandson—" "Enough," Harrison exploded. "I don't care who he claims to be. Children do not treat patients. In this hospital." Jerome took a step forward, and for the first time, Harrison saw something other than calm in those eyes. He saw a determination that made him involuntarily step back. "Dr. Harrison, I know you're lying to Dr. Foster about Emma's progress. I know you know exactly what's wrong with her, but you're hiding it because you don't want to admit you misdiagnosed her 3 years ago." The world stopped around Harrison. How could this kid know about the misdiagnosis he had made and hidden all these years? "You don't know anything," Harrison whispered, but his voice was shaking. "I know Emma doesn't have severe cerebral palsy like you told her father," Jerome continued, unrelenting. "I know she has a treatable condition that you misdiagnosed, and now you're afraid to correct because it would ruin your reputation." Harrison felt cold sweat trickle down his back. That misdiagnosis had haunted his nights for years. He had been young, arrogant, too eager to impress Dr. Foster with his expertise. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. Correcting it would mean admitting incompetence and possibly facing a medical malpractice lawsuit. "How do you—" Harrison began, but Jerome wasn't finished. "And I know how to help her. My grandmother taught me exactly how to treat cases like this. But you'd rather keep an innocent child suffering than admit you made a mistake." Janet watched the scene in shock. She had never seen Dr. Harrison so pale and out of control. "If you don't get out of here right now, I'll call the police," Harrison threatened, but his voice no longer had the authority it once had. Jerome smiled. A smile that didn't suit a 10-year-old boy laden with painful wisdom and unwavering determination. "You can call them doctor, but every day I'll be here reminding you that there's a girl in there who could be running and playing if you had the courage to do the right thing." As Jerome calmly walked away, Harrison stood still, feeling his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. This boy knew too much new secrets that could destroy his career. What Dr. Harrison didn't realize yet was that Jerome wasn't there by chance, and his knowledge of Emma's case was just the tip of an iceberg about to emerge from the icy waters of truth, carrying revelations that would transform that hospital forever. Dr. Harrison was determined to end this problem once and for all. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting with the entire pediatric neurology team. "Colleagues, we have a delicate situation," he announced, adjusting his glasses and assuming his most authoritative posture. "An unaccompanied child has been disrupting our routine and even attempting to interfere with patient treatment. We need to take action." Dr. Rebecca Chun, a neurologist who had recently arrived from Boston, frowned. "What kind of interference?" "The boy claims to have medical knowledge inherited from a supposed grandmother who worked here. It's clearly a case of childhood fantasy, but it's causing disturbances." Janet, the nurse who had spoken with Jerome, cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Dr. Harrison, I checked the records. Lily Williams did indeed work here for 30 years, and she had a grandson who was recently orphaned." The silence in the room was awkward. Harrison felt sweat begin to form on his forehead. "That doesn't change the fact that a child can't." "Excuse me," Dr. Chun interrupted. "May I ask what kind of knowledge this boy has demonstrated?" Harrison hesitated. He couldn't admit that Jerome had identified his misdiagnosis without completely exposing himself. "Unscientific techniques, baseless theories." "I'd like to talk to him," Dr. Chun said decisively. "If he really is Lily Williams' grandson, that changes everything. She was a legend here." That afternoon, Jerome was at his usual spot on the steps when Dr. Chun approached him. Unlike Harrison, she sat down next to him, treating him as an equal. "You must be Jerome." "I'm Dr. Chun. I've heard about your grandmother." Jerome studied her carefully. "Did you work with her?" "Not directly, but everyone knew her reputation. She saved many children that other doctors had given up on. She taught me that sometimes doctors get so caught up in their books that they forget to look at the real child." Jerome replied, his maturity again surprising an adult. Dr. Chun smiled. "Your grandmother was wise. Tell me about Emma Foster." Jerome looked her straight in the eye. "Do you really want to know, or are you testing me to see if I know anything?" The bluntness of the question caught Dr. Chun off guard. "I really want to know. Emma doesn't have severe cerebral palsy as her chart says. She has neuromot, disconnection syndrome that can be treated with specific stimulation. My grandmother taught me to recognize the signs." Dr. Chun felt a chill. If Jerome was right, it meant that Emma had spent 3 years receiving inadequate treatment. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I saw the same symptoms in my cousin before my grandmother helped her. And because I've been watching Emma for weeks through that window. She responds to stimuli that a child with severe cerebral palsy would not respond to." At that moment, Dr. Harrison appeared at the hospital entrance and saw the two talking. His expression turned to pure fury. "Dr. Chun, what are you doing?" "Talking to a very perceptive young man," she replied, standing up. "Jerome, I'd like you to meet Dr. Foster. I think he should hear your observations about Emma." Harrison's blood ran cold. If Jerome spoke to Dr. Foster about the misdiagnosis, his career would be over. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Harrison exploded. "Dr. Chun, you are allowing a street kid to question our medical protocols. A child who demonstrates exceptional medical knowledge inherited from one of the best professionals this hospital has ever had," Dr. Chun replied firmly. Jerome stood up slowly, watching the dynamic between the two doctors. There was something in Harrison's tension that confirmed his suspicions. "Dr. Harrison," Jerome said with disturbing calm, "you're afraid of what I'm going to tell Dr. Foster, aren't you?" "I'm not afraid of anything a child can say." "Then why don't you let me show him what I know about Emma? If I'm wrong, you can kick me out of here for good." Dr. Chun looked between Jerome and Harrison, sensing a tension that went far beyond a simple disagreement over protocol. "Harrison, what's the problem?" "If the boy is wrong, it will only confirm our methods." Harrison was cornered. Refusing now would raise suspicion, but agreeing could expose his devastating mistake. "All right," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But when this charade is exposed, I want action taken." Jerome smiled, a smile that didn't belong on a 10-year-old boy. "Perfect, Dr. Harrison. I think you're going to be very surprised by what we discover." As they walked toward the hospital, Dr. Chun whispered to Jerome, "Are you sure you know what you're doing? My grandmother always said that the truth has a way of finding out, and that when someone tries to hide it for too long, it finds a way out." What Dr. Harrison didn't know was that Jerome had spent the last 2 weeks doing much more than just watching Emma through the window. He had talked to longtime nurses, discreetly reviewed progress reports, and most importantly, he had carefully noted every inconsistency in the girl's treatment. His notebook, tucked away in a worn backpack, contained information that would not only prove his diagnosis correct, but also reveal the extent of the deception Harrison had perpetuated for years. As they entered the hospital, Jerome touched the backpack lightly. His grandmother had taught him that justice sometimes required patience, but when the time was right, it was relentless, like a storm finally finding its strength. It was as everyone was heading toward Emma's room that Jerome noticed something that made him smile inwardly. Dr. Harrison was sweating, obsessively checking his watch and making that nervous gesture of adjusting his glasses that his grandmother had taught him to recognize in doctors when they knew they were about to be exposed. The truth was coming, and Harrison still had no idea of the hurricane that was about to devastate his carefully constructed world of lies and false prestige. When they entered the physical therapy room where Emma was waiting, Jerome discreetly took his tattered notebook out of his backpack. Dr. Harrison had no idea that those handwritten pages contained 3 weeks of meticulous observations that were about to destroy a 15-year career built on lies. "Dr. Foster," Jerome said, approaching the wheelchair where Emma smiled when she saw him, "can I show you something about your daughter?" Dr. Foster, a serious man who had dedicated the last years of his life to trying to cure his daughter, nodded. "Of course, but be quick." Jerome knelt down to Emma's height and began a series of simple exercises, lightly touching different points on her legs and feet. To everyone's shock, Emma reacted immediately, moving her fingers and even trying to bend her knees. "That's impossible," muttered Dr. Harrison, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "Emma has severe cerebral palsy. These reactions are just involuntary spasms." "Dr. Harrison," Jerome said, turning with that disturbing calm, "Emma does not have severe cerebral palsy. She has neuromod disconnection syndrome, a completely different and treatable condition." Dr. Chun watched Emma's reactions with fascination. "Jerome, how can you be so sure?" Jerome opened his notebook and began to read. November 1st, Emma responded to tactile stimuli on her lower extremities. Day 5 demonstrated conscious control of facial muscles when encouraged. Day 10 attempted to vocalize specific words when properly stimulated. Dr. Foster turned pale. "You've been observing my daughter without my permission. From the public sidewalk, sir, and what I saw were clear signs that her diagnosis has been wrong for 3 years. Dr. Harrison felt the world collapse around him. That's absurd, a 10-year-old child questioning a certified medical diagnosis. Jerome stood up and looked directly at Harrison. "Dr. Harrison, do you want me to tell Dr. Foster about the MRI scans that were misinterpreted in 2020? Or how you hid the results of neurological tests that contradicted your initial diagnosis?" The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Foster slowly turned to Harrison. "What is he talking about?" Harrison was visibly shaking now. "Michael, don't listen to this kid. He's making this up. My grandmother kept copies of all the important tests," Jerome continued relentlessly. "She was working on the file when Emma's results came in. She showed me how to identify the signs you chose to ignore." Jerome turned the page of his notebook and read, "MRI report. March 5, 2020. Fundamentally normal brain structures. Signs consistent with mild to moderate neuromod disconnection syndrome. Prognosis favorable with appropriate stimulation. Dr. Foster snatched the notebook from Jerome's hands. His eyes scanned the meticulous notes, each observation dated and detailed. Harrison, is this true? Dr. Harrison was cornered, and he knew it. Michael, at the time there was uncertainty in the diagnosis. Uncertainty? Dr. Foster exploded. You told me my daughter would never walk, that I should accept she would be dependent forever. I was being cautious. Cautious? Dr. Chun grabbed the notebook and examined the notes. Jerome, these observations are extraordinarily accurate. You documented neurological response patterns that clearly indicate. Jerome approached Emma again. Princess, do you want to try standing up? With his help, Emma was able to support her weight on her legs for a few seconds. It wasn't the steady steps that would come with proper treatment, but it was conscious, controlled movement. Dr. Foster had tears in his eyes. 3 years, Harrison. 3 years of my daughter's life that could have been different. Michael, please, let me explain. Explain? Dr. Foster was clearly furious now. You lied to me. You lied to Emma. You stole years of her development for what? For pride? For fear of admitting a mistake? Jerome closed his notebook calmly. Dr. Foster, with the right treatment, Emma can live a completely normal life. Maybe with some limitations, but she can walk, run, play like any other child. Dr. Chun was visibly moved. Jerome, will you help me develop a proper treatment plan for Emma? It would be an honor, Doctor. Dr. Harrison made one last desperate attempt. You can't take a child who lives on the streets seriously. Where are his credentials, his medical training? Jerome turned to him one last time. Dr. Harrison, my grandmother always said that true knowledge doesn't come from diplomas on the wall, but from genuine love for patients, something you clearly forgot. Dr. Foster held Emma in his lap, watching her respond positively to Jerome's stimuli. Harrison, you're fired. And you can be sure that the medical board will hear exactly what happened here. Harrison staggered out of the room, his career destroyed not by a rival doctor or a formal investigation, but by a 10-year-old boy who cared more about a child than he had ever cared about his own reputation. While Jerome worked patiently with Emma, showing Dr. Chun the techniques his grandmother had taught him, a new reality began to take shape in that hospital, a reality where true medicine was practiced not by those with the most degrees, but by those with the most heart. What no one knew yet was that Jerome held one last secret about his grandmother, a secret that would transform not only Emma's life but the future of hundreds of children who would come to that hospital in search of hope. 6 months after that transformative day, Chicago Memorial Hospital was a completely different place. Jerome Williams, now officially adopted by the Foster family, had become the youngest consultant in the institution's history, working side by side with Dr. Chun in the newly created Department of Innovative Pediatric Neuro-Rehabilitation. Emma ran through the hospital corridors, her steady footsteps echoing where once there had been only the silence of wheelchair wheels. At 8 years old, she not only walked, she danced, jumped, and played like any other child. More importantly, she had become an ambassador for a program that had already helped dozens of children with similar misdiagnoses. Jerome! Jerome! Emma shouted, running toward her adoptive brother who was examining medical records in the new room named the Lily Williams Center for Neuro-Rehabilitation. We're helping 3 more children today, Dr. Chun said. Jerome smiled, watching the girl who had been the catalyst for a medical revolution. Princess, are you ready to show them that miracles do happen when there is true love? Dr. Foster watched the scene from the hallway, still moved by the sight of his daughter running. The guilt over the lost years had been replaced by deep, gratitude, and a renewed purpose. He had used his influence to ensure that Jerome's program received full funding and national recognition. Asterisk. As for Dr. Harrison, his fall had been as spectacular as his arrogance. Fired for medical negligence, he lost his license after an investigation revealed other suspicious cases. Today, he worked as a medical equipment salesman, a bitter irony for someone who once considered himself untouchable. Dr. Jerome? Dr. Chun said, approaching with a folder, 5 more cases have come in of children that other doctors said would never walk. Their parents traveled from other states after hearing about our work. Jerome took the folder, his eyes shining, with the same determination he had shown on that first day. We're going to help all of them, doctor. It was then that Dr. Chun revealed something she had discovered in Lily Williams' personal files. Jerome, did you know that your grandmother left behind a journal with techniques she developed? Over 30 years? Techniques that were never officially documented because she knew the traditional medical community wouldn't be ready to accept unconventional methods. Jerome was silent for a moment. She always said that true knowledge was something that was passed from heart to heart, not from book to book. This journal, Dr. Chun continued, contains observations on over 200 cases of children she secretly helped over the years, cases that doctors had given up on. But she healed using love, patience, and techniques she learned by observing the children themselves. Asterisk. Dr. Foster joined the conversation. Jerome, your grandmother didn't just save Emma. She left a legacy that will save thousands of children. At that moment, Emma ran up to Jerome and hugged him. Thank you for teaching me how to walk, brother. Jerome hugged her back, whispering, Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the greatest miracles come disguised as children the world gave up on too soon. Asterisk. Today, 3 years later, the Lily Williams Center is a national leader in pediatric neuro-rehabilitation. Jerome, now 13, is studying medicine in a special program for gifted students. But he never stops working with the children who come to the center. Dr. Harrison continues to fight to rebuild his career. But he has discovered that reputations destroyed by arrogance and prejudice are much harder to repair than medical diagnoses. He lost not only his job, but the trust of an entire community that discovered how it had underestimated the power of truth in the hands of a determined child. Emma Foster, now 11, is studying to become a pediatrician. She wants to give back to all the children who were once considered lost causes, just like she was. Jerome learned that the greatest revenge against prejudice is not anger or resentment, but the quiet success that transforms lives and proves that greatness has no color, social class, or age. He turned the humiliation he suffered on his first day into fuel for a revolution that changed the lives of hundreds of families. The plaque at the entrance to the Lily Williams Center bears a phrase that Jerome chose himself. Here, we believe that every miracle begins when someone refuses to give up on a child. Dr. Chun always says to anyone who will listen, Jerome taught us that true medicine doesn't come from diplomas hanging on the wall, but from a heart that refuses to accept that anyone is a lost cause. Asterisk. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they knew everything about your abilities? Have you ever turned humiliation into motivation to prove your worth? Leave your story of overcoming adversity in the comments. If this story of courage and determination touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true strength knows no age, color, or social background, and that sometimes the greatest teachers come in the smallest packages. Asterisk.